Between the late 1970s and early 1980s, Chicago was gripped by terror. A string of brutal murders targeted young women, baffling the police and leaving a community in fear. Dubbed the Chicago Ripper Crew, this group's horrific actions would go down in history as one of Chicago's most chilling criminal cases. The horror began on May 23, 1981, when Linda Sutton, a 26-year-old woman, was found dead in a field outside Chicago. Her body showed signs of extreme violence and bizarre mutilations. Linda's murder left investigators horrified, but it was only the beginning. Over the next year, several more women would be found with similar injuries, sparking fears of a sadistic serial killer or cult at large. Investigators began piecing together evidence, but the lack of witnesses and the gruesome nature of the crimes made progress slow. The brutality was unlike anything the police had ever seen, and a sense of urgency filled every step. Experts were consulted to create a profile of the killer, leading detectives to suspect a group of perpetrators instead of a single individual. Soon, suspicion fell on a group of 4 men: Robin Gecht, Edward Spreitzer, and brothers Andrew and Thomas Cockerellis. Known collectively as the Chicago Ripper Crew, these men were believed to be involved in rituals of torture and murder. Gecht, the supposed leader, had ties to local cult practices, heightening the dark allure of the case. Investigators discovered that the Ripper Crew performed bizarre rituals before and after each killing. According to testimonies, the men engaged in acts of violence as part of a gruesome initiation, with Gecht allegedly overseeing each ritual. The chilling nature of these acts horrified even seasoned detectives, who struggled to grasp the group's twisted motives. The Ripper Crew seemed to have a specific type of victim. Young women, often alone, were their targets, and their disappearances followed a chillingly similar pattern. The women were abducted, tortured, and later found in desolate areas around Chicago. The pattern sent waves of fear through the city as it became clear that these weren't isolated incidents, but the work of a sadistic group operating in the shadows. In a surprising twist, police received a break in the case when a woman named Beverly Washington survived an attack by the Ripper Crew. Beverly managed to provide a description of her attackers, recalling their appearance and behaviors. Her testimony would later be a key piece of evidence, allowing the police to connect her case with other unsolved murders around Chicago. With Beverly's detailed description, detectives began surveilling suspects and investigating connections between the men. The pieces of the puzzle started to align as evidence emerged from each of their lives. Investigators discovered disturbing items in Robin Gecht's possession, confirming their darkest suspicions. The net was closing in, and the crew knew their days were numbered. In 1982, the police arrested Robin Gecht and his 3 accomplices. During intense interrogations, 2 members of the crew, Andrew and Thomas Cockerellis, eventually confessed to their roles in the murders, describing the horrors they committed. Their confessions shocked the public, revealing the true extent of the group's depravity and violence. Robin Gecht, the supposed leader of the Ripper Crew, never confessed or acknowledged his involvement in the murders. Despite overwhelming evidence, Gecht remained silent, claiming innocence. His uncooperative behavior and eerie calmness only added to the public's fascination and horror as he became the mysterious figure at the center of the case. As the trial began, prosecutors presented chilling evidence, including gruesome details from the confessions and disturbing items found in the suspect's possession. The public was horrified by the extent of the crimes. Courtroom spectators were left in shock as the Ripper Crew's heinous acts were laid bare, revealing a level of cruelty that felt almost unimaginable. Each member of the Ripper Crew faced separate charges and varying sentences. Andrew Cockerellis received the death penalty, while Edward Spreitzer and Thomas Cockerellis were sentenced to lengthy prison terms. Robin Gecht, though suspected to be the mastermind, received a shorter sentence due to a lack of direct evidence linking him to the murders. The revelation of the Ripper Crew's actions shook Chicago to its core. The city mourned the lives lost and grappled with the horror that such brutality could happen in their own neighborhoods. Media coverage was intense, and the case would forever be remembered as one of Chicago's darkest chapters. Decades later, the case of the Chicago Ripper Crew remains one of the most disturbing crime stories in American history. It highlighted the need for improved methods in tracking serial crimes and supporting victims. The case has since been a haunting reminder of the unimaginable cruelty that humans can inflict and has served as a cautionary tale for generations. The Chicago Ripper crew case serves as a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath society's surface. While the main suspects were apprehended, many still wonder if justice was truly served. This case remains a cautionary tale and a chilling testament to the depths of human depravity, forever etched into the history of crime in America. On September 20th, 1988, Tara Calico left her home in Belen, New Mexico, for her usual bike ride along State Road 47. She told her mother she'd return by noon and joked that if she didn't, her mom should come looking. Tara, a lively 19-year-old college student, enjoyed her daily rides. But as noon passed, Tara's mother knew something was wrong. Tara hadn't returned, and she hadn't contacted anyone. The small town of Belen was about to be shaken by one of its most haunting mysteries. When Tara didn't return, her family immediately reported her missing. Police, friends, and neighbors scoured the route she often took. Volunteers searched ditches, fields, and even forests along the roadside. They found a few clues, a broken bike reflector and tire marks, but no sign of Tara. As days turned to weeks, Belen's tight-knit community began to fear the worst. Tara's mother, desperate for answers, felt haunted by their last conversation. Months after Tara's disappearance, a disturbing photograph surfaced. In June 1989, a Polaroid photo of a young woman and boy, bound and gagged, was found in a parking lot in Port St. Joe, Florida, over 1,500 miles from Belen. The young woman bore a striking resemblance to Tara. The FBI examined the photo, but results were inconclusive. While some believed it was Tara, others remained skeptical. This mysterious photo added fuel to a case that was already fraught with eerie possibilities. Tara's mother, Patty Dole, was unrelenting in her search for her daughter. She tirelessly contacted investigators, distributed flyers, and even appeared on national television, pleading for any information about Tara. The Polaroid became a glimmer of hope, but with it came even more questions. Patty firmly believed the girl in the photo was Tara, holding on to hope that her daughter was still alive somewhere, waiting to be found. The case took on a life of its own, with theories circulating everywhere. Some believed Tara was kidnapped by someone she knew, while others thought she had fallen victim to human trafficking. Rumors of suspicious vans and people seen on the route that day began to surface. Every lead seemed to open another layer of mystery, and soon the case became one of the most complex and bewildering disappearances in New Mexico's history. Despite extensive investigations, police hit dead ends. Leads fizzled out, witnesses' statements were inconclusive, and each new clue seemed to lead nowhere. The case grew colder with each passing month, and soon authorities were left with little to go on. Frustration mounted as Tara's family and the community sought answers. But the mystery of Tara's disappearance seemed as elusive as ever, leaving everyone involved baffled. As the case went cold, Tara Calico's disappearance became part of New Mexico's unsolved mysteries. Local newspapers and TV stations continued to run stories on anniversaries of her disappearance, keeping her memory alive. People continued to wonder what had happened to her and whether she was still alive. The mystery captivated locals and haunted detectives who had worked tirelessly, with no breakthrough in sight. Years later, people still pondered over the Polaroid. Some experts and family members remained convinced it was Tara, while others felt less sure, noting that some details didn't match. The boy in the photo was never identified, adding another layer to the mystery. For Patty Dole, Tara's mother, the photo was a painful reminder, both of her hope and her heartbreak. As time passed, more theories of foul play emerged. Some locals believed that Tara had been abducted by someone she crossed paths with on her daily ride. Others whispered that there might be a local conspiracy or cover-up. Some former investigators even hinted at possible suspects, though nothing concrete ever surfaced. Each theory added new suspicions, but failed to provide the closure that her family so desperately sought. In 1990, another Polaroid photo surfaced, further fueling suspicions. The photo depicted a young woman, once again resembling Tara, and a man who was never identified. This photo, found near a construction site, looked strikingly similar to the first, with the woman bound in a similar manner. But as before, no conclusive identification could be made. For the public, it was another eerie hint that Tara's disappearance was far from ordinary. Strange details in the case attracted a unique subset of theories. Some believe that Tara's disappearance was connected to occult practices or paranormal forces. People claim sightings, strange sounds along her bike route, and an inexplicable feeling of unease. The supernatural theories were met with skepticism, but only added another layer of intrigue to Tara's case. Was it mere speculation, or was something even stranger at play? Years passed, and authorities revisited the case with fresh eyes. Forensic advances provided a glimmer of hope. New testing on the tire marks and bike reflector found on the roadside offered the potential for DNA evidence. Investigators also followed up on previous sightings and leads, though none yielded the definitive breakthrough they hoped for. However, the re-examination kept the case alive and gave Tara's family renewed hope. The mystery surrounding Tara's case attracted intense media attention. True crime shows, podcasts, and investigative series brought her story to national audiences. Public interest surged, with countless online communities delving into theories and piecing together clues. People who never met Tara felt a connection to her story and rallied to keep her memory alive. This media attention, though often bittersweet, ensured that Tara would never be forgotten. Tara Calico's disappearance highlighted the need for change. Her case contributed to the improvement of missing persons investigations, leading to advancements in technology and public awareness. Her mother's tireless advocacy also inspired others to seek justice for their missing loved ones. Tara's case remains unsolved, but her story has left a lasting impact on law enforcement, the community, and the countless individuals who still seek justice in her name. To this day, Tara Calico's disappearance remains one of America's most haunting, unsolved mysteries. The unanswered questions continue to linger, and each anniversary reignites the pain for her family and community. While theories persist, no one truly knows what happened on that quiet September morning in 1988. Tara's spirit endures, not only as a symbol of the unknown, but as a reminder of those who vanish without a trace. In the year 2000, Old Joliet Prison in Illinois stood as a decaying reminder of a dark past. Built in 1858, the prison was notorious for housing some of Illinois' most dangerous criminals. Its grim walls and ominous hallways seemed haunted by violence and despair. Despite its closure in 2002, strange occurrences in its final years shocked those who worked within its walls. This story takes us to those eerie last days when two inmates met untimely deaths under mysterious circumstances. The two victims were Mark Riley and Derek Lane, both serving lengthy sentences for violent crimes. Mark, 34, had been a known troublemaker, while Derek, 29, had a history of gang affiliations. Though they weren't friends, the two men found themselves in the same cell block. Despite security measures, prison life was rough, and violence wasn't uncommon. But the sheer brutality of what happened to them was beyond anything seen before within Joliet's walls. On a cold January morning, guards were doing their usual rounds when they discovered Mark and Derek in their cells, unresponsive. Blood covered the cell floor, and both men bore brutal injuries. The guards immediately called for medical help, but it was too late. The circumstances seemed inexplicable. No weapons were found, and the doors had been locked all night. Rumors of the prison's haunted past only added to the chilling atmosphere. The injuries Mark and Derek suffered were unusual. Both had broken bones and severe head trauma, yet there was no sign of a struggle with another inmate. The autopsy report revealed blunt force trauma, but the source was unknown. Security cameras showed nothing out of the ordinary, and other inmates claimed they hadn't heard a thing. The mystery only deepened, leaving authorities with more questions than answers. The prison guards were deeply disturbed. Some speculated that an unknown assailant had somehow bypassed security to commit the murders. Others believed it could be a ghostly force, given the prison's haunted reputation. With no evidence of any escape or intrusion, many guards grew increasingly uneasy. The rumor mill ran wild with theories, each one adding a layer of fear to those who worked behind Joliet's stone walls. The prison administration questioned inmates, hoping someone had seen or heard something. Surprisingly, several prisoners claimed they felt an overwhelming sense of dread the night of the murders. Some even reported hearing whispers echoing down the corridors. But when pressed for details, each account differed, with nothing concrete or reliable to pursue. Still, these eerie testimonies only deepened the air of mystery. Investigators combed the crime scene for any clues, yet found nothing unusual. The cell door showed no signs of forced entry, and no contraband weapons were discovered. Forensic teams scoured the area, testing every possible item, but no foreign fingerprints or DNA were found. It was as though the assailant had never been there at all, leaving the murders feeling impossibly unsolvable. With no logical answers, some turned to supernatural explanations. Old Joliet Prison had long been rumored to be haunted by the spirits of former inmates. Many believed that an unseen force could have been responsible for the deaths, punishing those within its walls. Though authorities dismissed these ideas, the eerie feeling that lingered around the prison made it hard for anyone to fully disregard them. One prison guard who was working the night of the murders resigned shortly after the incident. In interviews, he described feeling an oppressive presence that he couldn't shake. He claimed he heard faint whispers in the dead of night and even saw shadows where there should have been none. Although he couldn't provide any concrete evidence, his testimony only fueled the rumors. For many, his departure was a sign that something truly sinister had happened within the prison walls. In response to the growing fear, a group of paranormal investigators was allowed access to Old Joliet Prison. Equipped with cameras and special devices, they ventured into the abandoned cells at night. The team reported hearing unusual sounds and even recorded cold spots, which they believed to be signs of spirits. Despite their findings, skeptics questioned the validity of the evidence, but believers saw it as proof of the prison's haunted past. The families of Mark and Derek demanded answers. They struggled to understand how their loved ones could have met such a violent end in a supposedly secure facility. Frustrated by the lack of progress, they pushed for an independent investigation. However, prison officials were reluctant to allow outsiders, citing security and legal restrictions. The family's search for justice intensified the mystery and made the case a topic of public fascination. Months later, a hidden letter was found in Derek's cell during a routine inspection. In it, Derek wrote about his fear of something inhuman lurking in the prison. He described nights filled with strange noises and the feeling of being watched. While many dismissed it as the ramblings of a frightened man, some saw it as a clue pointing to something more sinister. This eerie letter hinted at a terror that went beyond the physical realm. As the investigation continued, suspicions began to fall on a few of the prison guards. Some inmates claimed that certain guards had been acting strangely on the night of the murders, avoiding their rounds in the cell block where Mark and Derek were held. While these accusations couldn't be verified, they cast a shadow of doubt over the prison staff. Were they hiding something, or was it merely a series of unfortunate coincidences? Despite ongoing inquiries and family pressure, the investigation reached a dead end. With no physical evidence and only eerie rumors, the prison authorities eventually declared the case unsolvable. The prison's reputation for the supernatural endured, and the tragic deaths of Mark and Derek remained a haunting mystery. Their families were left with heartbreak and unanswered questions as the case officially went cold. Years later, Old Joliet Prison stands abandoned, but the memory of the unexplained murders lingers. Those who visit report a heavy, unsettling atmosphere, and some say they've seen figures in the shadows. Paranormal enthusiasts still explore its haunted halls, hoping to catch a glimpse of what caused the deaths of Mark and Derek. The prison remains a place shrouded in mystery, where reality and the supernatural seem to blur. In April 2009, 17-year-old Britney Drexel traveled from Rochester, New York, to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, without her parents' permission. She was eager to spend time with friends and take a break from the pressures of high school. Britney's mother, Dawn, didn't know about the trip until Britney was already gone, leaving her both anxious and upset. Little did Dawn know, this would be the last time she would hear her daughter's voice. This trip, meant to be a short getaway, would soon turn into one of the most haunting mysteries in recent history. On April 25, 2009, Britney was last seen walking along the Myrtle Beach boardwalk around 8 p.m. She had spent the day enjoying the beach, but that night, she walked alone to meet a friend at a nearby hotel. Surveillance footage captured her entering the hotel and leaving shortly after. Her cell phone activity stopped around 9:15 p.m. That was the last time anyone saw or heard from Britney. Her friends quickly reported her missing, triggering a widespread search across the area. When Dawn Drexel, Britney's mother, learned of her daughter's disappearance, she was devastated. Dawn had already been uneasy about Britney's decision to go to Myrtle Beach, and her worst fears were becoming a reality. She made desperate calls to Britney's friends, law enforcement, and even drove down to South Carolina. Her emotional plea for help resonated with the public, and soon news of Britney's disappearance spread across the country. Every mother's nightmare was now Dawn's reality. Local law enforcement began a massive search operation, combing through Myrtle Beach and the surrounding areas. Volunteers, law enforcement, and rescue teams joined forces, searching the beaches, hotels, and wooded areas, hoping to find any trace of Britney. However, the search yielded no significant clues. Investigators began to suspect foul play, as Britney had left behind all of her belongings in the hotel. The eerie silence surrounding her disappearance added an unsettling weight to the case. Investigators tracked Britney's cell phone, which showed a final signal ping about 50 miles away from Myrtle Beach in an area known as Georgetown County. The signal had stopped abruptly, deepening suspicions that something terrible had happened. This discovery expanded the search zone and led investigators into swamplands and remote areas. Unfortunately, even with search teams combing through the region, no further clues emerged. Britney's trail had gone cold, leaving her family and investigators in despair. During the investigation, witnesses came forward with eerie details. Some claimed to have seen Britney with unknown men near Myrtle Beach that night. Others spoke of suspicious activity along remote areas near Georgetown County. While no concrete evidence emerged, these disturbing statements suggested Britney may have been in danger before her disappearance. As investigators pieced together these sightings, they found themselves with more questions than answers, leaving the case shrouded in mystery. As the case progressed, law enforcement turned their attention to Britney's friends, questioning them about the events leading up to her disappearance. Suspicion grew as investigators delved into their statements, trying to pinpoint any inconsistencies. They wanted to understand why Britney was left alone that night and if anyone might have lured her away. The pressure on her friends intensified, but they maintained their innocence, adding to the mystery. In June 1989, a disturbing photograph was found in a Florida parking lot. The Polaroid showed a young woman and a boy, both bound and gagged, lying in the back of a van. The woman in the photo bore a striking resemblance to Britney Drexel, leading some to wonder if this could be a clue to her whereabouts. Forensic experts analyzed the image, and though inconclusive, it ignited a wave of speculation and fear. The haunting image became a national obsession, deepening the mystery around Britney's disappearance. Over the years, authorities received numerous tips and leads regarding Britney's disappearance, but each one seemed to hit a dead end. Sightings were reported across several states, but none were confirmed. People claimed to have seen her in various places, but none of these sightings held up under investigation. Each lead raised hopes, only to bring frustration when it proved unhelpful. The search for Britney turned into a heartbreaking cycle of hope and despair for her family and the investigative team. In 2016, a significant breakthrough emerged when an inmate claimed to have information on Britney's disappearance. The man, Taquan Brown, alleged that he had witnessed her being held against her will shortly after her disappearance. Brown claimed Britney had been taken by a group involved in illegal activities. Despite this chilling revelation, concrete evidence was still lacking, and doubts surrounded the credibility of the confession. This lead, however, brought renewed energy to the case, keeping Britney's story alive. With new information emerging, the FBI became more heavily involved in the investigation. Teams worked tirelessly to re-interview witnesses, re-examine evidence, and follow up on Brown's allegations. Investigators explored connections to local crime networks and scrutinized known offenders in the area, hoping to link Britney's case with other criminal activities. The renewed investigation efforts heightened public interest, and the case continued to haunt those who remembered her story. Year after year, Britney's family continued to wait, clinging to hope that one day they would learn the truth. Her mother, Dawn, became an outspoken advocate for missing persons, determined to keep her daughter's case alive. The Drexel family's unending perseverance inspired many, but their pain was evident. Each day without answers weighed heavily on them, a constant reminder of the nightmare they were living. Britney's absence became an enduring scar on their lives. Despite the years that passed, Britney's family and investigators held out hope that new leads would eventually surface. Advances in forensic technology, combined with the relentless pursuit of the truth, fueled their determination. Dawn Drexel, while coping with heartbreak, remained optimistic that someone, somewhere knew something that could end the mystery. They continued to push for awareness and support, striving for the day they would finally bring Britney home, or at least find closure. To this day, Britney Drexel's disappearance remains an open case. Her family continues to work with law enforcement and publicize her story in the hope that someone will finally come forward with the key to solving the mystery. Britney's case has become a symbol of hope, resilience, and the undying love of a family searching for answers. The haunting question remains, what really happened to Britney Drexel? Britney's story serves as a powerful reminder of the impact one person's disappearance can have on a community and a nation. Her legacy is carried on by her family's tireless advocacy for the missing and their efforts to prevent similar tragedies. Britney's case continues to resonate, bringing awareness to the many others who have disappeared and the loved ones left behind. In keeping her memory alive, her family ensures that Britney will never be forgotten. On November 22, 2018, Kelsey Barth was last seen in Woodland Park, Colorado, where she had been shopping for Thanksgiving. A dedicated mother, Kelsey was known for her loving nature and commitment to her one-year-old daughter, Kaylee. As days passed without any word from her, concern grew among family and friends. Kelsey's disappearance became alarming when she failed to return home, prompting her family to file a missing person report. What began as a routine holiday turned into a chilling mystery that would captivate the nation. As police began their investigation, they quickly uncovered troubling details about Kelsey's life. Her fiancé, Patrick Frazee, became a person of interest early on. The couple had been in a tumultuous relationship, which raised suspicions among investigators. Kelsey's family revealed that she had planned to end the relationship, leading to fears that this may have played a role in her disappearance. With her last known location captured on surveillance footage, authorities felt the pressure to solve the case quickly. Patrick Frazee's behavior came under intense scrutiny as the investigation progressed. Initially cooperative with police, he later became evasive when questioned about Kelsey's whereabouts. Investigators discovered that he had not reported Kelsey missing until days after she was last seen. This delay raised eyebrows and prompted detectives to dig deeper into his actions during that critical period. With mounting evidence pointing toward Patrick, the focus of the investigation shifted firmly onto him. As the investigation unfolded, a massive search operation was launched to locate Kelsey. Local law enforcement, volunteers, and even search and rescue teams scoured the surrounding areas, including forests and hiking trails. Posters with Kelsey's photo were distributed widely, urging anyone with information to come forward. Despite their efforts, the search yielded no significant leads, and time was slipping away. The community rallied together, hoping for Kelsey's safe return, but uncertainty loomed over the investigation. Investigators delved into Kelsey's phone records, revealing unsettling details. Text messages and calls from Patrick were analyzed, showing a pattern of communication that raised further questions. Authorities discovered that the last person Kelsey had communicated with was Patrick, just hours before she was reported missing. This revelation deepened suspicions around Patrick, suggesting he may have had a more significant role in her disappearance than initially thought. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together. On December 21, 2018, nearly a month after Kelsey's disappearance, Patrick Frazee was arrested. Charged with first-degree murder, his arrest sent shockwaves through the community and the nation. Authorities had pieced together enough evidence to conclude that Kelsey had been killed, though her body remained undiscovered. The news left many in disbelief. Kelsey's disappearance had captivated their hearts, and the thought of her being murdered was almost unfathomable. As the trial began in 2019, emotions ran high. Kelsey's family attended each session, seeking justice for their beloved daughter. The prosecution laid out its case, detailing the timeline of events and the evidence against Patrick. Witnesses testified, and the courtroom was filled with tension as the story of Kelsey's tragic fate unfolded. The trial was not only about seeking justice for Kelsey, but also about understanding the truth behind her heartbreaking disappearance. Patrick's defense team argued for his innocence, claiming that the evidence presented was circumstantial and lacked direct proof. They painted a picture of a flawed investigation, suggesting that authorities were too quick to blame Patrick without exploring other possibilities. The defense attempted to shift the focus away from Patrick, hinting that Kelsey may have gone missing for other reasons entirely. The courtroom drama intensified as both sides fought to sway the jury. Throughout the trial, several witnesses provided compelling testimonies. Friends of Kelsey spoke about her fears regarding her relationship with Patrick, while co-workers shared insights into her character. Additionally, a key witness recounted the day Kelsey disappeared, describing her last known actions and interactions. Each testimony painted a vivid picture of Kelsey's life, revealing the complexities of her relationship with Patrick and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. In March 2019, after months of searching, Kelsey's remains were discovered in a remote area of Colorado. The tragic news shattered hopes of finding her alive and added a painful layer to the ongoing trial. The remains were confirmed through DNA testing, confirming the worst fears of her family and friends. This grim discovery reignited the prosecution's case against Patrick, as they could now charge him with murder in the death of Kelsey. As the trial neared its conclusion, both the prosecution and defense presented their closing arguments. The prosecution reiterated the timeline and evidence, emphasizing Patrick's motives and actions leading up to Kelsey's disappearance. The defense countered by reminding the jury of the lack of direct evidence. With emotions running high, the jury was tasked with deciding the fate of Patrick Frazee, a decision that would have lasting implications for all involved. On November 22, 2019, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Gasps filled the courtroom as Patrick was taken into custody. The conviction marked a significant moment for Kelsey's family, who had fought tirelessly for justice. Emotions poured out as they reflected on Kelsey's life and the tragic loss they endured. The verdict not only brought a sense of closure, but also honored Kelsey's memory. In the aftermath of the trial, the community rallied around Kelsey's family, offering support and condolences. Memorials were held to honor her memory, and discussions about domestic violence and its impact on families gained momentum. Kelsey's story shed light on the importance of recognizing warning signs in relationships, encouraging others to speak out and seek help. Her legacy would continue to inspire advocacy for victims of abuse and highlight the need for vigilance in communities. Kelsey's disappearance and subsequent murder sparked conversations across the nation about safety and awareness. Her family became advocates for change, participating in awareness campaigns to educate others about the dangers of domestic violence. Kelsey's story is now a poignant reminder of the lives affected by such tragedies. The movement to honor her memory emphasizes the necessity of compassion and vigilance in preventing future incidents. As time passes, Kelsey Barth's memory remains alive through the ongoing efforts of her family and supporters. They continue to share her story, hoping to inspire others to recognize the importance of safety in relationships. Kelsey's legacy serves as a beacon of hope for those who have experienced similar situations, encouraging them to seek help and to advocate for themselves. The impact of her life endures, ensuring that she will never be forgotten. In the 1970s, the San Francisco Bay Area was a vibrant and bustling metropolis. But beneath its beautiful facade lay a chilling secret. A series of brutal murders shocked the community, with a shadowy figure lurking in the background, evading capture. From 1970 to 1980, this unknown killer struck multiple times, leaving behind a trail of fear and unanswered questions. Who was this murderer, and why did they target the unsuspecting victims of the city? Join us as we delve into the dark history of the San Francisco Bay Area murders. The first known victim was a young woman named Mary, who vanished on a warm summer evening in 1970. Her friends reported her missing after she failed to return home from a party. Days later, her lifeless body was discovered in a remote area, horrifying the local community. Mary's tragic fate marked the beginning of a dark chapter, sparking fear and uncertainty among the residents. Authorities struggled to find any leads, as the investigation into her death yielded few clues and whispers of a serial killer began to circulate. As the investigation continued, police discovered a disturbing pattern. Over the next few years, several more young women vanished under similar circumstances, each case echoing Mary's tragic end. Families were devastated, and the community was gripped by fear. Local news outlets reported on the escalating crisis, urging residents to stay vigilant. The police began to suspect they were dealing with a serial killer, but with each new victim, the case grew colder, and the killer remained elusive, slipping further into the shadows. In 1975, the investigation intensified as detectives employed new forensic techniques, hoping to uncover crucial evidence. The police interviewed witnesses, family members, and friends of the victims, seeking any connection between them. Tips flooded in from the public, but many led to dead ends. Despite the mounting pressure, investigators were determined to crack the case. They formed specialized task forces, collaborating with the FBI to analyze patterns and develop profiles of the possible suspect. Yet the more they dug, the more the case slipped through their fingers. In 1977, a significant breakthrough occurred when forensic experts linked several murders through DNA evidence, confirming they were the work of the same killer. This revelation reignited the investigation, providing hope to the families of the victims. Authorities held press conferences appealing for information and encouraging the community to come forward with any tips. The case gained national attention, and a renewed sense of urgency propelled the investigation forward as the public became more aware of the lurking danger in their midst. Investigators began to notice a disturbing profile emerging among the victims. Most were young women, often from similar socioeconomic backgrounds. They had bright futures ahead, but were tragically cut short by the killer. Many were last seen in nightlife hotspots, highlighting a potential pattern in their movements. The detectives scrutinized these areas, hoping to find witnesses who might have seen something unusual. As they gathered this information, the chilling reality set in. The killer was hunting among them, exploiting their vulnerabilities. As the murders continued, fear spread throughout the San Francisco Bay Area. Residents were on high alert, changing their routines and avoiding certain areas after dark. Neighborhood watch groups formed, and community meetings became common, where residents exchanged information and discussed safety measures. The sense of unity was palpable, but so was the anxiety. Families worried for their daughters, and friends were cautious about their night outings. The community's response highlighted the impact of the murders, transforming the once vibrant city into a place shadowed by fear. The media frenzy surrounding the murders only heightened the tension. News outlets reported on the case daily, often sensationalizing details to capture public interest. With each new article, the killer's notoriety grew, and so did the public's obsession with the story. Investigative journalists delved into the lives of the victims, uncovering heartbreaking details and personal stories. However, the relentless coverage also added pressure on law enforcement, as they felt the weight of public expectation to solve the case before more lives were lost. Detectives began to analyze the killer's modus operandi, seeking clues that might lead them to his identity. The patterns revealed that the murderer typically struck late at night, often using a method that involved luring victims into secluded areas. The violence was brutal, leaving behind signs of a struggle. The police hypothesized that the killer might have local knowledge, as he seemed to know the city well and where to find vulnerable women. The more they learned, the clearer it became that this killer was not just random, he was calculated and methodical. In 1978, a breakthrough in the case brought a suspect to the forefront. A man with a criminal background was arrested for unrelated charges, and during questioning, detectives noticed inconsistencies in his alibi. Investigators found that he had been in the area during several of the murders and even had a history of violence against women. The evidence against him began to pile up, and for a brief moment, hope flickered that they had finally caught their killer. However, as the investigation deepened, questions about his involvement remained unanswered. Despite the promising lead, the investigation soon hit another dead end. The suspect's alibi was ultimately confirmed, and the evidence linking him to the murders proved insufficient for prosecution. As the detectives regrouped, the community's fear intensified once more. Families began to feel a sense of hopelessness as the years passed with no resolution. The media coverage began to dwindle, and the killer seemed to slip back into obscurity, continuing his reign of terror in silence. In 1980, the case was reopened as new forensic technologies emerged. Investigators revisited old evidence, re-examining everything from witness statements to physical evidence collected at crime scenes. Advances in DNA analysis offered a glimmer of hope that the killer could still be identified. Law enforcement agencies from across the state collaborated, pooling resources and expertise to solve the case. The community held on to hope, eager for justice for the victims who had been lost in the shadows for too long. The last known victim was found in late 1980, bringing the chilling cycle to an end. Her disappearance sparked outrage, and the community united in mourning. The murder shocked the nation, reigniting interest in the case and bringing renewed attention to the unsolved murders of the past decade. Families of the victims rallied for justice, demanding that law enforcement continue the search for answers. As they honored the memories of those lost, the question remained, would the killer ever be brought to justice? The legacy of the San Francisco Bay Area murders lingers to this day, a haunting reminder of the fear that gripped a city for over a decade. Families still seek closure, and community members remember the victims, honoring their lives with memorials and tributes. The case serves as a chilling example of how quickly safety can be compromised and how the search for justice can stretch on for years. Despite advances in forensic science, the killer's identity remains a mystery, buried in the past yet ever present in the community's collective memory. As the years go by, hope remains alive among those affected by the San Francisco Bay Area murders. Cold case units continue to analyze old evidence with modern technology, determined to solve the mystery and bring closure to the victims' families. The stories of the victims are not forgotten. They inspire ongoing discussions about safety, justice, and community resilience. The fight for truth continues, reminding us that while some chapters may remain open, every effort made towards resolution brings us one step closer to healing. In December 1900, a stormy winter night cloaked the remote Flannan Isles, where a solitary lighthouse stood as a beacon for passing ships. The Lighthouse Keepers, James Duckett, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur, were tasked with ensuring the light remained lit. However, when a supply ship arrived, they found the lighthouse eerily silent. The men were missing, and the light had been extinguished for days. As the storm raged outside, a sense of foreboding filled the air, leaving the crew on the ship perplexed about what had transpired. The supply ship, the Hesperus, arrived on December 26th, ready to deliver provisions. The crew, accustomed to the routine of the lighthouse, felt an unsettling tension as they approached. When they docked, the lighthouse was dark, a disturbing sight that was out of character for the keepers. They rang the bell, hoping for a response, but only silence greeted them. With growing apprehension, they decided to investigate further, fearing the worst for the men they had come to rely on during their voyages. As the crew of the Hesperus made their way to the lighthouse, they found the door ajar. Inside, everything appeared undisturbed. Dinner was still laid out on the table, and the lamps were unlit. This eerie scene raised immediate alarm bells. Where could the keepers have gone? A search party was quickly organized, and as they scoured the surrounding cliffs and rocky beaches, a chilling thought began to take root. The men might not be coming back. Upon searching the lighthouse, the crew discovered the logbook, where the last entries were written just days before. The final notes detailed the terrible storm that had hit the island, with descriptions of how fierce the winds and waves were. Curiously, the last entry on December 15th mentioned strange occurrences. The keepers felt a sense of unease and reported seeing mysterious lights in the sky. This entry only fueled the mystery surrounding their disappearance, raising more questions than answers. News of the Lighthouse Keepers' disappearance spread quickly through the nearby communities. Families and friends gathered, united in their fear and concern. Local fishermen and sailors joined the search efforts, combing the waters and nearby shores for any sign of the missing men. The community's spirit was evident, but so was the underlying anxiety. Each day that passed without answers intensified the sorrow and uncertainty, transforming a tight-knit coastal community into one filled with dread. As the days turned into weeks, various theories began to circulate regarding the keepers' disappearance. Some speculated that the men had fallen victim to the treacherous seas, while others believed they may have encountered a rogue wave. There were even whispers of supernatural involvement, with locals suggesting that the lighthouse might be haunted. Each theory was more bizarre than the last, but they all shared a common thread: a desperate need to explain the unexplainable. As public interest in the case grew, an official inquiry was launched into the disappearance of the Lighthouse Keepers. The inquiry aimed to gather evidence, interview witnesses, and uncover the truth behind their vanishing. Investigators examined the lighthouse's operational protocols and the conditions surrounding the night of their disappearance. Despite the thorough investigation, the keeper's fate remained a mystery, leading to growing frustration among the families and community members seeking closure. During the inquiry, investigators found evidence that suggested a struggle had occurred at the lighthouse. Some of the personal belongings of the keepers were found scattered about, and a lantern was discovered missing. These findings hinted at a possible altercation or emergency situation that led to their disappearance. The questions multiplied. Did they encounter an intruder? Were they trying to escape a dangerous situation? With each clue, the enigma only deepened. As speculation continued, some began to theorize that the keepers may have abandoned their posts. Rumors spread that they could have left the lighthouse to seek shelter from the storm or in search of help. This theory was controversial. Many felt it was unlikely that experienced keepers would leave their station during a critical time. Yet it provided another perspective on the mystery, adding layers to the narrative of their disappearance. The mystery of the lighthouse keepers soon became intertwined with local legends and folklore. Stories about the Flannan Isles began to circulate, with tales of ghostly apparitions and supernatural happenings. This folklore captured the imagination of the community and the public, fueling interest in the case. The lighthouse, once a symbol of safety, transformed into a source of local lore, blurring the lines between reality and myth as people tried to explain the inexplicable. The disappearance of the Flannan Isles lighthouse keepers left a lasting impact on maritime practices and safety protocols. The incident raised awareness about the importance of keeping open lines of communication and ensuring the well-being of lighthouse personnel. Changes were made in regulations to improve safety measures, ensuring that no other keepers would face the same fate. Their mysterious vanishing became a case study for maritime authorities, highlighting the need for vigilance in even the most isolated locations. Over the years, the Flannan Isles case was revisited by amateur sleuths and professional investigators alike. New technology and investigative techniques brought renewed interest to the case. Modern forensic science offered possibilities for re-examining evidence that had long been dormant. Each new theory and approach aimed to shed light on the unsolved mystery, with a hope that the truth would one day emerge from the shadows of history. The disappearance of the lighthouse keepers has inspired numerous books, documentaries, and artistic representations. The haunting story captures the imagination of storytellers and filmmakers, reflecting society's fascination with the unknown. As the years go by, the tale of the Flannan Isles becomes woven into cultural fabric, reminding us of our collective curiosity about mystery and the human experience. The keeper's legacy lives on, forever entwined with the history of the lighthouse. Families of the missing keepers continue to seek closure, holding on to hope that one day the mystery will be solved. Annual memorials are held on the Flannan Isles, honoring their memory and the sacrifices they made. The community remains dedicated to remembering the keepers and sharing their story. With every generation, the legacy of the lighthouse keepers is passed down, fostering an ongoing dialogue about loss, hope, and the quest for answers. To this day, the mystery of the missing lighthouse keepers continues to intrigue historians, investigators, and the general public. As new theories arise and old ones are revisited, the story remains a captivating enigma. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse stands as a solemn reminder of the unknown and the ever-present questions about human existence. In the heart of the Scottish Islands, the legacy of the keepers endures, a testament to the fragility of life and the mysteries that still lie beyond the horizon. In the heart of New York City during the late 1990s, an unthinkable terror began to unfold. A masked figure, later dubbed the Ghostface Killer, emerged from the shadows, leaving a trail of bloodshed in his wake. This enigmatic murderer targeted unsuspecting victims, each murder seemingly connected by a chilling pattern that left police baffled. The killer's methods were as brutal as they were calculated, creating a sense of unease that rippled through the community. As fear gripped the city, the quest to uncover the identity of this relentless predator became a race against time. The first known victim of the Ghostface Killer was a young woman named Sarah. On a chilly October night, Sarah was returning home from a late shift at her job when she became the target of this remorseless killer. Witnesses reported seeing her walking alone, blissfully unaware of the horror lurking just behind her. The following morning, her lifeless body was discovered in a nearby alley, sending shockwaves through the neighborhood. The brutal nature of her murder marked the beginning of a reign of terror that would haunt the city for months to come. As the investigation into Sarah's murder unfolded, detectives began to notice a disturbing pattern. A series of brutal killings followed, each with striking similarities to the first. The killer targeted young women, using the same modus operandi, stalking, tormenting, and finally executing his victims in the most gruesome fashion. This emerging pattern caused panic among the city's residents, with parents warning their children not to walk alone at night. The media caught wind of the story, sensationalizing the events and labeling the mysterious killer as the Ghostface Killer, intensifying the fear gripping the city. With the pressure mounting, the NYPD launched a full-scale investigation into the Ghostface Killer. Detectives worked around the clock, interviewing witnesses, collecting evidence, and analyzing patterns. The community was urged to remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity. Task forces were formed, and the investigation garnered national attention. Local businesses offered rewards for information leading to the killer's arrest, and posters depicting the Ghostface mask began to appear all over the city. The sense of urgency was palpable as detectives raced against the clock to prevent another murder. Tragically, despite the intensified efforts to catch the Ghostface Killer, the second victim was claimed just weeks later. Jennifer, a college student, was found dead in her dormitory room, her lifeless body bearing the same marks of violence as Sarah. The brutality of the crime sent shockwaves through the student community, sparking outrage and fear. Vigils were held and students banded together, demanding greater security measures on campus. The killer's ability to strike again only fueled the hysteria, leading to an even more frantic search for answers. The city was in turmoil as news of Jennifer's murder spread. Residents began to take matters into their own hands, forming neighborhood watch groups and holding community meetings to discuss safety measures. Social media buzzed with tips and theories, while local news outlets provided continuous updates. The Ghostface Killer became a household name, and his mask was now a symbol of fear. People were afraid to walk alone, especially at night, as the threat of the killer loomed large over the city. It was a time of heightened paranoia, with everyone feeling the weight of uncertainty. As the investigation dragged on with no leads, theories about the killer's identity began to surface. Speculation ran rampant, with some suggesting that the Ghostface Killer might be someone from within the community, possibly a disgruntled former employee or a rejected suitor. Detectives looked into the backgrounds of potential suspects, combing through records and interviewing associates. Meanwhile, the killer remained at large, continuing to taunt the police through cryptic messages left at the crime scenes. The psychological games only added to the pressure on investigators, who were desperate for a breakthrough. As the murders continued, media coverage intensified, creating a frenzy around the Ghostface Killer. Television stations dedicated entire segments to the case, and newspaper headlines blared warnings. The killer became a figure of obsession, with experts weighing in on his psychological profile. The public's fascination only fueled the fear, as more and more people tuned in to learn about the latest developments. Yet amidst the sensationalism, the families of the victims mourned their losses, overshadowed by the media circus surrounding the case. It was a grim reminder of the human cost behind the headlines. After months of relentless investigation, a breakthrough finally came. A witness came forward, recalling a suspicious figure seen near the scene of one of the murders. This information reignited hope among detectives, who immediately began tracking down the lead. They discovered that the man in question had a history of violent behavior and was known to frequent areas where the murders occurred. With a solid lead in hand, the task force prepared to bring the suspect in for questioning, believing they were finally one step closer to catching the elusive Ghostface Killer. The day finally arrived when the NYPD executed a carefully coordinated plan to apprehend the suspect. Armed with a warrant, officers stormed the man's apartment, finding evidence that linked him to the murders. As he was taken into custody, the media frenzy erupted once again, capturing every moment of the arrest. The suspect's identity sent shockwaves through the community. He was a local man with ties to some of the victims. As the details of his involvement began to unfold, it became clear that the Ghostface Killer had evaded capture for far too long. The trial of the Ghostface Killer captivated the nation, as the courtroom filled with reporters and spectators eager to witness justice. Prosecutors painted a chilling picture of the heinous crimes, detailing the suffering inflicted on the victims and their families. The defense, however, sought to undermine the evidence, claiming that the prosecution's case was built on circumstantial evidence and speculation. As the trial unfolded, every witness took the stand, revealing the profound impact of the murders on their lives. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, with many on edge as they awaited the verdict. As the trial progressed, families of the victims bravely took the stand, sharing their heartbreaking stories. They spoke of the loved ones they had lost, the dreams that were shattered, and the emptiness that lingered in their lives. Their emotional testimonies resonated with the jury and the public, humanizing the victims and reminding everyone of the real cost of violence. The courtroom fell silent as each family member recounted their grief, turning the proceedings into a poignant reminder of the lives affected by the Ghostface Killer's actions. The impact was undeniable, and tears flowed freely. After weeks of intense testimony and deliberation, the jury finally reached a verdict. As the courtroom held its breath, the foreman announced, "We find the defendant guilty on all counts." The sound of those words reverberated throughout the room, eliciting gasps and tears from the victims' families. The accused sat in shock, his expression a mix of disbelief and anger. This verdict was more than just a legal decision. It symbolized a moment of justice for the lives lost and a community scarred by violence. The Ghostface Killer was finally brought to justice, but the scars of his actions would last forever. In the wake of the verdict, the community began to heal. Vigils were held to honor the victims, bringing people together in solidarity against violence. Survivors and families shared their stories, fostering a sense of unity and resilience. Local leaders emphasized the importance of addressing the root causes of crime and supporting mental health initiatives. The Ghostface Killer may have shattered lives, but the community's response was one of strength and determination. They vowed to work together to ensure that such a tragedy would never happen again, transforming pain into purpose and fear into action. Years later, the case of the Ghostface Killer still resonates. Documentaries and articles analyze the events, sparking discussions about crime, justice, and prevention. The survivors and families continue to advocate for change, reminding society that justice is not just about punishment, but also about healing and understanding. While the Ghostface Killer was caught, the lessons learned from this tragedy remain relevant, urging future generations to confront violence with compassion and resilience. The legacy of those lost lives serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of community and the fight against crime. On the fateful night of March the 25th, 1990, Happyland Social Club in the Bronx, New York, was alive with the sounds of music, laughter, and celebration. The club, a haven for the local Latinx community, was packed with around 200 patrons enjoying a night out. Unbeknownst to them, lurking in the shadows was a sense of foreboding. As the clock struck 3 a.m., the atmosphere shifted dramatically, setting the stage for an unimaginable tragedy that would forever haunt the city. In a horrifying twist, a disgruntled former patron who had been denied entry returned to the club with a vengeance. Armed with gasoline, he poured it throughout the entrance and ignited it, creating a raging inferno. The flames spread rapidly, consuming the air in the room. Panic erupted as patrons realized the danger, but many were trapped inside, desperately searching for an escape. The fire roared like a beast, leaving chaos and terror in its wake. Within minutes, the New York City Fire Department received emergency calls, alerting them to the raging fire. Firefighters rushed to the scene, facing an inferno that had engulfed the club. As they battled the flames, the tragedy unfolded before them. Despite their bravery, the fire's intensity was overwhelming, and the chaotic scene made rescue efforts perilous. Many firefighters risked their lives, determined to save as many souls as possible from the clutches of death. As the fire was finally extinguished, the grim reality set in. 87 lives were lost that night, leaving behind shattered families and a community in mourning. The scene outside the club was heartbreaking. Loved ones gathered, searching for answers and comfort amidst the chaos. The sheer scale of the tragedy shocked the nation, igniting discussions about safety regulations and the need for justice. The Happyland Fire was not just a local disaster. It was a wake-up call for a city grappling with issues of safety and security. In the days following the fire, investigators launched an extensive probe into the incident. They combed through the charred remains of the club, looking for clues that might lead them to the perpetrator. Eyewitnesses were interviewed, and surveillance footage was examined in hopes of piecing together the events of that tragic night. The community demanded answers, and pressure mounted on law enforcement to find those responsible for the horror that had unfolded. As the investigation progressed, authorities began to focus on a particular individual, a disgruntled former patron who had been denied entry that night. His rage seemed to fuel a motive for the devastating act. Detectives delved into his background, uncovering a history of anger and violence. They learned he had made threats before, and investigators became increasingly convinced that he was the person responsible for the tragedy that night. The search for justice gained momentum as the community rallied together. Vigils were held in memory of the victims, and citizens expressed their outrage over the senseless violence. Activists and local leaders demanded better safety regulations and accountability from the city. The collective grief turned into a call for action, with many promising to ensure that such a tragedy would never happen again. The strength of the community shone through in their determination to seek justice for those lost. As investigators zeroed in on their suspect, the legal proceedings began to unfold. Charges were filed against the former patron, who was accused of multiple counts of murder and arson. The courtroom became a battleground for justice as the prosecution presented their case. They painted a vivid picture of the horrors of that night, aiming to hold the accused accountable for his actions. The atmosphere was charged with emotion as families of the victims watched closely, yearning for justice. During the trial, witnesses were called to testify about the horrifying events of that night. Survivors recounted their experiences, detailing the chaos and fear they faced as they attempted to escape the flames. Their testimonies were powerful and emotional, shedding light on the human toll of the tragedy. Each story added weight to the prosecution's case, highlighting the need for justice and accountability. The courtroom was silent as the victims' families listened, their hearts heavy with sorrow and hope. After weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury finally reached a verdict. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the foreman stood to announce the decision. "We find the defendant guilty on all counts," he declared, and a wave of emotion washed over the room. The victims' families erupted in tears, a mix of relief and sorrow flooding through them. The verdict marked a significant moment of justice in a case that had captured the nation's attention and heart. Following the verdict, the sentencing phase commenced. The prosecution argued for the maximum penalty, emphasizing the loss of innocent lives and the irreversible damage caused by the defendant's actions. The defense attempted to mitigate the sentence, citing the defendant's troubled past. Tensions ran high as families of the victims addressed the court, passionately conveying the pain of their loss. The judge listened carefully, ultimately deciding on a sentence that reflected the severity of the crime, delivering a powerful message about accountability. In the aftermath of the trial, the Bronx community began to heal. Memorials and tributes were established to honor the 87 lives lost in the fire. Community leaders organized support groups to help families cope with their grief. The tragedy sparked discussions about fire safety and regulations, pushing for change to prevent similar disasters in the future. While the scars of that night remained, the resilience of the community shone through as they united in remembrance and healing. The Happyland Fire served as a tragic reminder of the importance of safety regulations and the need for vigilance in public spaces. In the years that followed, new laws were implemented to enhance fire safety measures in nightclubs and similar venues. The community's response transformed grief into action, advocating for change and prevention. It became a pivotal moment that changed how New York approached safety and emergency preparedness, ensuring that such a tragedy would not be repeated. Years later, the memory of the Happyland Fire and its victims remains etched in the hearts of many. Anniversaries of the tragedy are marked by vigils, educational events, and discussions about safety. Families continue to share their stories, ensuring that those who lost their lives are never forgotten. The legacy of the victims serves as a powerful reminder of the need for compassion, community, and the fight for justice in the face of tragedy. The Happyland Fire remains a crucial chapter in the history of public safety in New York City. It not only highlighted the need for stricter fire codes, but also ignited a movement for social change and community resilience. Through advocacy, education, and remembrance, the community continues to honor the lives lost while fostering a safer future for all. The lessons learned from this tragedy ensure that the spirit of those 87 victims lives on, motivating generations to prioritize safety and compassion. In the quiet town of Missoula, Montana, a chilling crime unfolded on the night of July 25, 2006. The lifeless body of 20-year-old university student Katie Hager was discovered in her off-campus apartment. The news sent shockwaves through the community, leaving friends and family in disbelief. Katie was known for her vibrant personality and bright future, making her death all the more tragic. As investigators began to piece together the details, the town braced itself for a journey filled with mystery and sorrow. Katie Hager was a dedicated student attending the University of Montana, pursuing a degree in psychology. Friends described her as compassionate, with a passion for helping others. She volunteered at local shelters and was active in campus life. Her bright smile and infectious laughter lit up any room. As the investigation unfolded, her vibrant past was contrasted sharply with the tragedy of her untimely death, making the quest for justice even more urgent. The following morning, a concerned friend, unable to reach Katie, went to her apartment. Upon entering, the friend was met with a horrifying sight. Katie's lifeless body was found lying on the floor. Panic ensued as the friend immediately called 911, alerting authorities to the grim discovery. Law enforcement arrived swiftly, and the scene was secured as investigators began their work. The shock of finding a loved one in such a state sent ripples through the community. Investigators began scouring the crime scene for any clues that might lead to the killer. They meticulously examined every inch of the apartment, collecting evidence and documenting the surroundings. The initial findings revealed that there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Katie may have known her assailant. This detail added a layer of complexity to the case, prompting detectives to focus their attention on people within Katie's circle. An autopsy was conducted to determine the cause of Katie's death. The coroner's report revealed that she had died from blunt force trauma, a discovery that shocked everyone. This finding indicated a violent struggle, raising concerns about the circumstances leading to her death. The details of the autopsy report were kept under wraps, but they fueled speculation within the community as fear and anxiety spread among residents. As news of Katie's murder spread, the Missoula community rallied together in shock and mourning. Vigils were held in her honor, bringing friends, family, and strangers together to remember a life cut short. The community's outpouring of grief reflected the impact Katie had on those around her. Local media covered the story extensively, keeping the public informed and engaged in the search for justice, creating a sense of urgency to solve the case. Investigators began interviewing Katie's friends and acquaintances, seeking any information that could lead to a suspect. Many described her as friendly and outgoing, but no one could recall any recent conflicts or enemies. The detectives carefully scrutinized her social life, including her relationships and interactions. This effort revealed important connections that would later prove critical in piecing together the timeline leading up to the murder. Weeks into the investigation, a breakthrough occurred when a witness came forward with new information. The witness reported seeing a suspicious individual near Katie's apartment around the time of her death. This tip led detectives to focus on a person of interest who had previously been in the vicinity. With a new lead in hand, the investigation intensified as the team worked to uncover the truth behind Katie's tragic fate. The individual of interest was identified as a local man with a troubled past. Investigators uncovered a history of violence and substance abuse, raising alarm bells. They brought him in for questioning, hoping to extract crucial information. During the interrogation, he denied any involvement in Katie's murder. Despite his claims, the detectives noted inconsistencies in his story that warranted further scrutiny and investigation. With the person of interest in custody, detectives worked diligently to gather more evidence. They obtained search warrants for his home and vehicle, hoping to find any physical evidence linking him to the crime. The search yielded several items of interest, including clothing and a potential weapon, but nothing definitively tied him to the murder. As time passed, the pressure mounted to solve the case, and the community's hope began to wane. As the case progressed, local media played a crucial role in keeping Katie's story alive. Reports highlighted the investigation, and community members organized rallies to demand justice. The media's coverage ensured that the case remained in the public eye, fostering a sense of urgency and determination to find Katie's killer. However, it also led to increased speculation and pressure on investigators, complicating their efforts to navigate the investigation without bias. With the ongoing investigation, the Missoula community remained vigilant. Residents formed neighborhood watch groups and increased communication with law enforcement. Fear lingered in the air as parents kept their children close, and college students altered their routines to prioritize safety. The murder of Katie Hager transformed the once peaceful town into a place of unease, demonstrating the profound impact one crime can have on an entire community. As months turned into years, the case of Katie Hager went cold. Investigators continued to pursue leads, but progress slowed significantly. The lack of concrete evidence made it difficult to move forward, and the community's hope began to fade. Families and friends of Katie held on to the belief that justice would eventually be served, but the weight of uncertainty grew heavier with each passing year. Years later, renewed interest in the case emerged as new technologies in forensic science developed. Cold case units began to revisit unsolved murders, including Katie's. Investigators re-examined the evidence collected at the crime scene, looking for DNA and other leads that may have been overlooked. The advancements in technology sparked a glimmer of hope for Katie's family and friends that the truth would finally come to light. The search for justice in the Missoula murder case continues to this day. With each passing year, Katie Hager's memory lives on in the hearts of those who knew her. Community members remain hopeful that someone will come forward with information that could solve the case. Though the pain of her loss endures, the collective determination for justice keeps her story alive. A reminder of the importance of community, compassion, and perseverance in the face of tragedy.